Great.
Dr. Richard Lazzaro, co-founder and chief medical officer at Lazzaro Medical. Thanks for joining me on this episode of Startup Health Now. So you are a thoracic surgeon with more than 35 years of experience, but you've specialized in minimally invasive and robotic thoracic surgery. So we're going to talk about some of that today. But before we dive in, just as a way of getting to know you and your biography a little bit better, given your work in robotics and given your work in minimally invasive surgery, I want to know what caused you to start thinking more entrepreneurially as a surgeon. There's folks who get into medicine and they spend their career doing the surgery that they're trained on. And there's folks that see problems and want to build solutions, which requires you to really stick your neck out, take some risks. So tell me where that spark came from for you.
That's a great question. I think a lot has to do with timing. When do you graduate? And, how is your early formative years of training? So for people my age, when we were kids growing up in the 70s and 80s, we ended up playing video games. So we understood the idea of looking at a screen and having your hands down by your lap and being able to control something that was either at eye level or above. And so that was probably pretty important, to be able to get away from just actually having to hold something in your hand to make something happen. And when I finished medical school, which was in 1988, the first 3 years of the training were all open surgery. And very characteristic phrase, the bigger the incision, the bigger the surgeon. And in order to do surgery, a lot of times you had to make a big incision to put your hands inside to be able to feel the critical structures that you were working on. But in 1991, in the United States, at our program, minimally invasive surgery came. So I'm a young kid, not too old, not fixed in my ways, and I already see change. And I see a controversy around change. I see people who are elite open surgeons talking about cowboys doing something new. I saw those guys who were referenced as cowboys learning to do open surgery closed, minimally invasive. And then years later, I got an opportunity to train at Pittsburgh with probably one of the pioneers of minimally invasive thoracic. And he told me never compromise an operation, never change an operation to make it minimally invasive. Got to maintain the same principles. So at a young age, before I was locked in my ways, set in a foundation, I already saw that there were opportunities to leverage technology and improve outcomes.
No, I got to stop and say my son would be inspired by the fact that you use video games as inspiration. What were you playing back in the day that became the germ of minimally invasive robotic surgery?
So I think it probably started out as Pong, something very easy.
There you go. Well, we're having this conversation because you've come up with an exciting new way to treat tracheobronchomalacia, if I said that correctly, or TBM, and that's a big part of your work. You're an expert at TBM, and this is a big part of the work you're doing with Lazzaro Medical. And so let's talk about TBM as a challenge, how big of a challenge it is, how broad it is in the population, and sort of what the current treatment pathways are.
Sure, that's a great question. TBM is really a hard diagnosis to make. It's right in front of us. People are coughing, people are short of breath, people are getting recurrent lung infections. And in the US, there's 41 million people walking around with asthma and COPD that have those same symptoms.
Okay.
And so much easier to kind of see those patients as you've got lung pathology, and not really look at your trachea or your main bronchial tubes. And the reason that people don't look at that is you need to do a CAT scan but most CAT scans are done with taking a deep breath in, and the machine will say, take a deep breath and hold it. And while you're expanding your lungs, your trachea is expanding. So you never really see it.
Okay.
So you have to order a CAT scan on patients with those symptoms and get your radiologists to say exhale and take another film. And then you can compare the inhalation to the exhalation and you can actually make the diagnosis. And our group is really working on developing awareness, not only awareness, but a diagnostic algorithm and a treatment plan. The old way of when you did make this diagnosis, it required a huge incision. And a lot of these people who have respiratory problems weren't strong enough to undergo that surgery. It was an incision through the side, you cut the major muscles of your chest, you removed a rib, and it probably took a year to recover. So what we ended up doing, not thinking that, hey, there's 3.6 million people that have a need, it was really based on one person. One person was diagnosed and he was told, hey, you're going to die, you'll never survive the surgery. And he got referred to me. And at the age of 79, he just said to me, I don't want to die. And I think the key thing was I knew how to do the surgery open. And I had already been pretty experienced with the robot. So, as God would have it, not having to learn a new procedure and a new technology at the same time. But because there was no roadmap in front of me, really had to educate my team and get everybody prepared. And then when we performed that operation, it went perfect and we wrote it up. That guy lived until he was 89. And an amazing story.
So that's the minimally invasive TBM surgery, which is separate from the product you've created through Lazzaro Medical, correct? They're married, but there's two parts of this coin. Is that correct? The scaffold system and the minimally invasive surgery that you pioneered?
Absolutely.
Okay.
You know, when early on I was doing this, Logan, I realized that there were a lot of people. Happened to be in New York, leading one of the hospitals in New York City. And a lot of physicians who've been in practice for more than 20 years in pulmonary medicine who realized that their patients who had progressive symptoms that weren't responding to treatments, that maybe it wasn't their lungs that were failing, maybe it was their airway. And so then we started to look. And my field is super conservative, which I would expect. And I spent about 3.5 years really doing these surgeries, writing out the manuscript of how to do the operation, publishing our outcomes, presenting it to surgery journals and meetings, and having it accepted by our peers. And that was the most validating, powerful thing. But different than open surgery, minimally invasive gives you an ability to share that knowledge with others. You know, here's your scan, here's exactly where you need to go in terms of the ports, here are the operative steps. But you asked me something earlier about, surgery. And, there's a bell-shaped curve. And the top 2.5% are really sitting in a good spot. But we're really looking at Lazzaro Medical is how do you standardize that repair? So all surgeons can leave the operating room with a shorter learning curve, same outcome. And the novice surgeon is as good as the intermediate, is as good as the experienced. And I think that there is a real performance enhancement approach to get 99% of the surgeons operating at the top 1%. And I think that our med device allows these surgeons to become hyper performers, get the benefits of minimally invasive surgery, get a standardized repair to this operation. And the really cool thing about it is people who are suffering, like you and I are talking, we're not short of breath. We're not struggling to take a deep breath in and out. These people slowly, like a dimmer switch, go from being really great, and they don't know that a year from now, they're not as great as they were a year before. So they slowly get worse. When you fix their windpipe, right, you go into the operating room with a disease, basically put like a cast on the outside of the windpipe, a scaffold. You've now stabilized it. You've restored the airway to where it needs to be. Their breathing gets better. Their pulmonary function tests get better. And their symptoms improve tremendously. There's not a lot of things in surgery where you can say, I go into the room with a problem, I come out with a solution,
Yeah.
and I've made people breathe better,
Yeah.
right? Without transplantation.
Breath of life, they feel like they have life again. So that's fascinating. So there's a big part of the Lazzaro Medical that is this minimally invasive robotic thoracic surgery. You've pioneered it. Now there's the educational piece that's huge. Let's talk now about the scaffold system that you've invented in order to make this surgery even more successful.
The scaffold system is really, I sat in my office one day with an iPad and the complexities of the standard approach with a mesh that's used off the shelf for a different reason, but can be used in that area, really requires a labor-intensive approach to secure a standard mesh to the airway. The beauty of our mesh is that it's two interlocking pieces that basically function with the ability to sew one side of the mesh to one side of the trachea, one side to the other. And now those two side edges, the right and left, are strong and they hold sutures really well because they're cartilage. But the airway is really very flat and very wide. And our two meshes connect really with like a male-female component. They're interlocking bands. And these interlocking bands basically work similar to zip ties. So as you pull it together, the airway narrows from side to side. And when you're looking down that pipe, it just opens up.
Got it. You kind of, yeah.
Yeah, it is a scaffold that restores the form and function of the airway, giving these people the ability to not only inhale, but to exhale. Because when they exhale, the airway collapses, they get short of breath, they can't clear mucus, they get recurrent infections, and they get this horrendous cough where they don't even want to go out to like the restaurants with their family because people think they're infected with some communicable disease like the pandemic. So it's life-changing.
Yeah. Where are you at in terms of the development of the scaffold and Lazzaro Medical?
We've been through, our first GLP, good lab practice studies, really phenomenally favorable results with the implantation of our mesh, not in humans yet. What we found was just the geometry, that interlocking bands, actually led to favorable incorporation, meaning the mesh gets incorporated into the tissue heals seemingly better than a standard mesh because there's more contact points for the body and the mesh, which I think is super important.
Okay.
We've been through the first round of our FDA. We have our second pre-submission meeting with them. After our first meeting, it was really, for me, a phenomenal opportunity to see the response. And they gave us a third pathway towards 510K clearance. We feel good about that. We've had alignment from two health systems, Northwell Health. We've had alignment from Mayo Clinic. Both institutions have invested in us, which feels good. We've had med device companies invest in us, so we feel good about that. And we just received our first NIH grant. And I think the government recognizes that TBM is an under-recognized super common disease in need of a treatment.
Dr. Lazzaro, thank you for taking time with me. This is, as you said, an underdiagnosed issue. And just the fact that you have come up with a way to allow people to come into surgery struggling for breath, chronic cough, and walk out breathing deeply. I can only imagine how that feels for you as a surgeon and how that feels for patients and their families to basically feel like they've gotten their life back. So thank you for that work. Keep pushing, and we will check back on your progress as you move towards FDA and commercialization.
Thanks, Logan. Really appreciate your time. Thank you.
All right. Take care. Be well.
Bye-bye.
Rob Israel, co-founder of Lazzaro Medical. Thanks for taking time with me today for Startup Health Now.
Thanks, Logan. It's great to be here again, actually, because you and I did this once a long time ago when we first started, pretty much.
One of the great things about Startup Health is getting that longitudinal journey, and I'm excited to get your update today. As you know, I was able to interview Dr. Richard Lazzaro, who was the I guess the initial brains behind the technology that became Lazzaro Medical, but obviously it's a long road to commercialization. So tell me what drew you as a business person to this project. What drew you to Dr. Lazzaro and his work on TBM?
Well, it's a great question, Logan, and the history I think matters because Dr. Lazzaro and I were actually really close friends in college. We went to Union College together. He got me through a lot of my biology classes. That was, and he happens to be, just a remarkably smart being. But more than that, he really has a way of being able to present information that's remarkably effective and take very difficult concepts and make them simple, which I think is super important in his position. It's funny because when he was talking about video games and what he played and he mentioned Pong, we actually were fierce rivals in Kung Fu Master at the Ratskeller at Union College. Many a late night fighting each other,
Wow.
and I would like to claim that I was the victor, but I think he would say the same. So in some small way, I may have been somewhat inspirational in his evolution in robotics because we used to do that together.
I love it. I love it. So take me to that time when your relationship comes full circle. You knew him when you were younger. Now you've had a successful career in business. I'd love to hear a few of those milestones. And then when did you come back around and reunite with Dr. Lazzaro?
Yeah, so Logan, we're entrepreneurs, and I've been fortunate to be able to build different companies in very different verticals. We built the largest, I think you may know this, but we built the largest popcorn retailer in the world, a company called Doc Popcorn that we inevitably sold to Dippin' Dots, and it continues to this day. And then I also another large company that I helped build and grow was a company in the apparel world. And that actually played a role here because our product, the product that Dr. Lazzaro has been talking about, our LM Scaffold, is actually a knitted product. So me having background in knitwear, which is what I did for 13 years, also really played a role here. But when I'd sold my my food company, and my wife and I, by the way, Renee, are partners in many of these endeavors, and she's been a remarkable builder with me of these companies. But we've been able to commercialize my dreams. We've been able to commercialize other folks' dreams. And when we were with Rich, Dr. Lazzaro, after we had a gathering in New York, and he was starting to talk about what was going on with TBM and the problem with this patient population and how vast it was. And I saw how passionate he was about this and what a major opportunity this was to make a difference for people and their lives. I mean, I'm very proud of the businesses that we built, and we were able to create a lot of smiles with the companies that we were able to build and create, but changing people's lives and their health dramatically, really is a very different phenomenon for me personally. And so I really looked at this as a remarkable challenge to be able to take Dr. Lazzaro's dream and what he's doing and help him really commercialize that dream and build a team around that and fund that, which is all very particular. And in med device, holy cow, did I have a lot to learn. And I have. It's been 6 years in the process. And we have surrounded Dr. Lazzaro with a remarkable team. Our president, Dawn Bitts, has 28 years of experience in respiratory. Our CTO, Ryan Redford, has a remarkable background in taking products and bringing them, to and through the FDA. He has a remarkable background in optics, working for Department of Defense and getting very, very difficult problems solved. And this was a challenging challenging dynamic to solve.
Yeah.
And we're really at the threshold now of creating a democratization of this procedure, and to be able to save the lives, as Dr. Lazzaro said, of at least 3.6 million people. He was very conservative, I think, in that number. I think it's more like 8 million that have this disease. 3.6 million really need the surgery today, or they're not going to, perhaps, they're going to be struggling very, very in a very major way. So that's kind of some of the background.
Yeah. I want to go back to something you said, just because it's fascinating. You said that your experience in knitwear proved useful in this current business because of the scaffold product. Tell me a little bit more about how you translated the knowledge from the one to the current product.
Yeah, it's a good question, because one would scratch their heads a bit, but we made knitted product, right? So we made sweaters and sportswear, and that was our main business. And we had knitters that I spent a lot of time with in our production facility. Facilities actually throughout what we call the Near East, Brooklyn and Queens. So we had literally did all of our knitting. I lived in New York at the time. I'm now in Boulder, Colorado, but we did all of our knitting in that area in contract manufacturing. So I learned a lot about how product is actually knit and what can and can't be done. And I knew that world pretty decently. This product is knitted from a polypropylene base or yarn, if you will. So some of the intricacies and just how to speak the language of knits was in my repertoire. And although we're working with a very unique process that has been really remarkable, we really had to find ways to build strength, durability, flexibility all into this product, and then create a construct that would allow it to do what Dr. Lazzaro really wanted, which was even to have windows. So you could actually, when he was talking about the membrane collapsing, right now he uses a standard piece of surgical mesh, and he has to sew through that surgical mesh into this very, very thin membrane that is the back of the trachea. And you can't pierce that membrane. That is a very difficult thing to do, to take a layer and then sew through that layer. And we've created windows, and of course, Dr. Lazzaro was instrumental in designing the product, but we were able to then take his vision and then execute that in a knitted product that is amazingly strong, can handle all of the coughing and durability that's necessary, and do it and make it in a way that is, that now we really believe that this product will democratize, as I said, this procedure. Dr. Lazzaro is very humble. There's very few people that can do what he does with a robotic instrument, and he's remarkable. But we will leverage that talent now, and we think that with our scaffold, with the LM Scaffold and system, any thoracic doctor that has been trained in robotics can do this procedure. And we think we'll cut this surgery time, Logan, by at least half. So right now it's 6 to 8 hours. We think we can be 3 to 4 hours, which is just remarkable and extremely efficient.
Let's talk about go-to-market and commercialization strategy. You're obviously very experienced in both things, in commercialization through your previous businesses. You mentioned that med device is uniquely challenging in this regard, and sure, you're not the first to say it on this show. So hearing from Dr. Lazzaro, thinking about going from idea to implementation, I'm left thinking, how do we leap the chasm and get this into people's, not into their hands, but into their lives? How do we save lives? So what's the great unlock here? How do you bridge the gap and get this to market?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, we built an amazing team, and now we're using other resources around that are being managed by us that do this all day, every day. And so we've got a group called Verinex that's doing our regulatory. We have a group called Boulder IQ that's doing our V work and testing. These are folks that live, eat, sleep, drink this process and have done it on. And as does our president, Dawn Bitts, know that world very well. And as I mentioned, so does Ryan Redford. So they are with us leading the charge, and we're using the leverage of this knowledge base to really help us navigate effectively through the FDA. I think, as Dr. Lazzaro said, our first pre-submission went remarkably well. And actually the FDA has TBM, tracheobronchomalacia, as a disease that is necessary to be worked on and to be fixed, if you will. So it's standing out for the FDA as something that is missing. And so we come at a very, very unique moment where we really believe that the clearance for us in a 510K is going to happen next year. And then we move into commercialization. And we're doing this with folks that have done this. Dawn herself has done probably 30 products and brought them through to FDA. So we're not recreating the wheel here. And I think that's very important for us as business people. There's a lot of things that I know and can do and have done, but I haven't personally brought a product through the FDA, which is why we surround ourselves with folks that have done this and do this all day long. And so we're getting, I think, what I would consider remarkable, intelligence, doing this in a way that is safe, has great efficacy, and then moving towards, working with the right folks into the right platforms to make sure we are successful. And then through commercialization, which is the next step, that's something we've done a lot of. Certainly with med device, there are some unique issues and dynamics around that, but not uncommon to building a product, growing a product, finding product market fit. And the truth of the matter is that there's such a demand that is really unrealized here. And part of the problem, and Dr. Lazzaro mentioned this too, Logan, is that diagnostics is a big issue here. And until Dr. Lazzaro really codified how to do a dynamic CT scan to show the collapse at exhalation, which was absolutely the key, this disease was being missed a lot. People were coughing and being given steroids and other things that exasperate this disease and not really getting to the bottom of it because their CAT scans didn't show collapse until Dr. Lazzaro had a methodology to show that collapse. So now we do a dynamic CT scan and we will tell you that you have TBM, period. And just like a knee that the cartilage is worn out, or a shoulder or a hip. And athletes understand this, and I unfortunately understand this too, because I've got shoulder stuff and knee stuff going on now. There will come a time, maybe 10 years or 3 years or 1 year, where, and now knee surgeries are so good. I mean, I have a friend that's much younger than me by 10 years, and he's like, Rob, I have no idea why I waited. He's like, I can ski now, I can bike now. I spent 3 years in misery. I have 2 new knees, and I am bionic, So why wait, right? And I think the same thing, Logan, is going to happen with this disease state. I think we've figured out how to diagnose it. We know how to repair it, and someone is going to say, why am I going to cough for another day, much less year? The open procedure was not a viable alternative. It was very, invasive, as Dr. Lazzaro shared. But this is a way to take folks that are really struggling and he didn't talk about this. He's done 250 of these surgeries, all very successfully, not using our scaffold, by the way, using a standard piece of surgical mesh. But when the scaffold will give, we think, better and quicker and more effective results. But why wait? Why wait and suffer when you literally can have a 3-hour surgery and have a new lease on life?
Walk out breathing deeply and all the health benefits that come from that. It's amazing. So you obviously have a great team. You've got great early partners, but as we both know, it takes a village to get a product like this, a whole platform, a whole educational platform. You're attacking this from a variety of angles to get that really into market, to get it distributed fully. I'll just declare my bias. I want you guys to succeed. So I want the right people to see this, and I want them to call you. It's just the way it is. And that can be difficult to do even under the best circumstances. So who's an ideal partner for you as you think about the next year or two, the next milestones to get this into market?
Thank you for asking that question. And I'll just say a couple of things. Number one, we were very fortunate in a very difficult marketplace to have had remarkable results. We have the Mayo Clinic is on our advisory board and an investor through a know-how agreement. Cleveland Clinic's been with us for years on our board as well. We have the largest robot company in the world as an investor, which we feel very honored and excited by. They're pretty exclusive about what they share, so we're careful about what information we give. But they've been a very big proponent of ours, and they see this also as a disease state that has a remarkable opportunity for them. We've also have Northwell as an investor. So the hospital group has been wonderful and a fantastic investor. And then we have Sweater as a VC, and we have other high net worth individuals, and we just got an NIH grant for $2.4 million. So nice. even our government is excited about what we're doing. So it's super wonderful, Logan. And basically, we're pretty much there. We have the funding now to go through, get our FDA clearance, and get into commercialization. But things happen, timing happens, and so we are looking for some additional dollars. And I think if you think about family offices and people that want to make a difference, or we think about high net worth individuals, people that have been in med device that understand this world, we're certainly open to those dialogues and conversations. And then, of course, strategics. And we've been talking with many of the strategics, and as I shared, some of them have already invested in us. But I think those are really the folks that can make a difference. And I think also people that want to make a difference and have impact. We are changing lives. If you have a parent that has chronic cough, or a friend, and you happen to be, looking for a great opportunity to invest in it, I mean, I think we are going to have a major event in the next few years, and it could be even sooner. Some companies right after they're FDA cleared have major events. Others, right as soon as they get into commercialization. We do think that there are companies that are very well suited to grow our concept in a major way, or we'll do it ourselves. It depends on really how the tea leaves fall and how the opportunities arise as we continue to execute and block and tackle and build the company, Logan, which we're doing it very well. But I think so. The answer for us is really: are there family offices? Are there high net worth individuals or angels? Are there, of impact investors that want to really make a difference? Are there folks that have been already impacted by this disease that would like to make the difference? And are there other strategics that would be interested too? And we'd love to have those dialogues and even learn from each other. So it's not just about the dollars too. Although that's obviously important, and that's at the end of the day what drives gives you the fuel to do what you need to do. But we're very open to just having dialogue, sharing our story, talking to great thoracic surgeons and others that want to be in this space and make a difference in this surgery. We've already trained 30 institutions. We'd like to train another 30 very soon, but we want to train them on our scaffold as soon as it's cleared, which is next year.
Awesome. Rob, I appreciate you taking the time with me. It's been great to get this update from you and from Dr. Lazzaro. We'll make sure that there's links below this to previous interviews we've done and to all the work that you're doing on your website and elsewhere. We will try to get this into the right hands, and we really believe in what you're doing. So we'll keep an eye on Lazzaro Medical, and we'll check back in for an update soon.
Logan, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. We really appreciate you guys and Startup Health. Great work. And we feel honored that you're a partner of ours as well.
All right. Take care. Be well, Rob.
Thank you, Logan. Bye-bye now.